Picture this. You walk right into a dimly lit, high-stakes VR interrogation room. The suspect is sitting across from you. But instead of looking down at a menu to pick one of 3 pre-written dialogue options, you just open your mouth. You improvise. Your actual voice, your actual words, that is your only controller.
So you lean in and maybe throw out a completely wild, off-the-wall interrogation tactic. And here is where it gets crazy. The NPC actually processes the exact words you just said. You watch them get visibly nervous, they shift in their seat, and then they fire back a totally unscripted response tailored perfectly to that wild bluff you just threw at them.
The suspect literally pauses, looks slightly nervous, and gives you a completely different answer than they gave the last person who played the game. This isn't some distant sci-fi concept anymore. As we'll see in this explainer, AI-driven NPCs are no longer just tech demos locked away in a lab. They are in games you can go buy right now on standalone headsets like the Meta Quest 3.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the death of scripted NPCs, and the exact problem they solved.
For years, traditional VR games have been totally chained to branching dialogue trees. You know the drill, right? You encounter every possible response within 10 minutes of playing. And the immersion just completely shatters the second you hit the invisible walls of the game's logic system, when you realize you're basically just clicking through a static flowchart. Contrast that massive frustration with a generative AI mind. It's fluid. It offers basically infinite conversational pathways. But here's the catch. To make this actually work in VR, the AI has to understand way more than just the text. It has to understand the actual room you're standing in.
And that is exactly where systems like SpatiaLLM come in. It's an open-source 3D vision model that basically takes messy point cloud data and turns it into structured understanding. It gives these LLM-driven agents the ability to understand real-world geometry, physical obstacles, and even complex social norms within the VR environment. So they aren't just spitting out text like your average chatbot. They are literally perceiving the space around them, recognizing the architecture, and interacting with you based on actual spatial awareness.
Moving on to Section 2, playable right now. Let's look at some games you can actually buy on Quest 3 today. Because it's one thing to talk about open-source vision models, but what does this mean for us, the players? Well, titles like Fabula Rasa, Vaudeville, and the upcoming Project Hail Mary represent the absolute bleeding edge here. They completely ditched the traditional dialogue menu for real-time, voice-driven interaction.
First up is Fabula Rasa, Dead Man Talking. This is such a clever experiment. You play as a prisoner caged over a monster pit, waiting to be executed. Your captors? Entirely LLM-powered. Improvised persuasion is literally your only escape mechanic. There's this hilarious anecdote from when they showed this at SXW. A player actually survived the execution pit by convincing the AI guard that a nearby knight in armor was, no joke, just 3 cats stacked on top of each other in a suit. The AI guard actually processed that totally bizarre logic and argued for a stay of execution for the player. It's basically unscripted improv comedy.
Now, Vaudeville takes a slightly different approach. It's an AI detective sim, and it tackles the biggest headache with generative AI, hallucinations. You know how early LLMs were basically yes men who would randomly make up fake alibis? To fix this, Vaudeville uses a custom truth table, a really strict logic gate. The AI literally cannot invent a fake alibi or confess unless you logically corner it with the facts. They even threw in a dynamic stress system, so if you insult the suspect or just use a super aggressive tone of voice, they get defensive and completely shut down the interrogation.
And then there's the highly anticipated Project Hail Mary, Journey Among the Stars. This mixed reality title is launching later this year, co-written with author Andy Weir. It bleeds the failing systems of a spaceship straight into your physical living room. And to survive, you have to diagnose these problems alongside your alien AI companion Rocky. But because Rocky is powered by AI, your bond isn't scripted at all. It builds organically based on your unique decisions and conversations in that session. It creates this existential tension that feels incredibly authentic.
All right, Section 3, the uncanny valley problem, and what still doesn't work. We definitely need a reality check here.
Because as awe-inspiring as all this sounds, the rough edges are still very rough. And it introduces a completely new type of immersion-breaking problem. The core issue? Latency. When you talk to a perfectly scripted character, latency is basically 0. The flow is totally natural, even if your choices are super limited. But with generative AI, processing your voice, pinging a cloud server, and generating an audio response takes real time. And those unnatural pauses, they completely shatter the immersion.
In fact, researchers studying LLM avatar integration in VR found this fascinating thing they called the realism verbosity paradox. Basically, when you're looking at a stunningly realistic avatar and it suddenly freezes dead in its tracks to think for 3 full seconds before answering you, it triggers a massive uncanny valley reaction. It actually feels way eerier and more disruptive to our brains than just clicking on a clunky, pre-recorded audio file.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, the hardware reality check, specifically for the Quest 3 standalone.
If we break down the current pipeline for real-time dialogue, you can see exactly why this is happening. You speak, that audio is translated to text and sent out via a cloud API call. The LLM processes it and generates a response. Then a text-to-speech engine creates a new audio file, which finally gets sent back to your headset for the NPC to react. Because practically all of this heavy lifting happens off-device, having a perfectly stable, lightning-fast Wi-Fi connection is absolutely mandatory right now.
Now, obviously, developers are trying to bring this processing locally to the headset itself. Frameworks like Meta's Executor-Torch and the Unity inference engine are starting to let optimized machine learning models run natively on Quest hardware. This is fantastic for things like spatial memory. It's the exact reason your Quest 3 can locally remember 15 different room layouts in your house without uploading your private home footage to the cloud. But trying to run a massive conversational LLM locally while simultaneously rendering a VR game, yeah, that's just not practical on mobile hardware yet. So, to sum up our hardware reality check, we are currently trapped in a cloud-reliant state. We get these incredibly dynamic conversations, but we pay a steep price in latency. The speculative future, and really the ultimate cure for this uncanny valley, is pure, on-device, local inference. Once mobile hardware actually catches up and lets these models run entirely on the headset with zero latency, the true potential of this immersive shift is going to explode.
Finally, Section 5, the imperfect future. Let's wrap up what all this means for interactive media.
The era of VR characters who actually listen to you has officially arrived. Is it imperfect? Absolutely. You're going to experience some latency, and yeah, occasionally an AI is going to hallucinate something completely bizarre. But honestly, despite those rough edges, the sheer magic of using your own voice to persuade a guard, interrogate a suspect, or bond with an alien, it creates a sense of social presence that is just awe-inspiring. It's an experience that traditional flat-screen gaming literally cannot replicate.
Which leaves us with a question for you to chew on. Have you tried a VR game with AI-driven dialogue yet? And if you have, did it feel like a massive breakthrough, or did those unnatural pauses and tech hiccups break the immersion for you? It's a fascinating space, and we're just at the beginning. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.